In 2017, an esports team was given an official warning for exclusively banning support champions in their match against Vivictus Esports, a team consisting of all female players. Riot labeled this a sign of intentional disrespect, stating, although banning 5 support champions is not prohibited by the rules, Riot Games and the wider gaming community took this as a manifestation of disrespect for the players of Vivictus. As ridiculous as this sounds, it wouldn't be the only time Riot had to step in to enforce some sort of rule. From players being fined for wearing the wrong shoes, to being fined for forgetting to take smite, today we learn about other times when professional gamers had to be disciplined for interesting reasons.
iMaze Road has been suspended for his team's first game Sunday due to verbally abusive behavior in ranked games over the last few weeks.
But before we get into that, today's video is sponsored by Prohibited. League of Legends gives you a lot to keep track of. So Prohibited is a companion app that makes a few things easier. From Champ Select, once you pick a champion, the app automatically provides you with the correct runes and item builds for your champion. Also, before the game even starts, you can quickly see if any of the champions or items you use were recently changed, saving you the time of reading the patch notes. Additionally, among their many features, the app provides you with in-game jungle timers on the map and the in-game spell tracker, where if you see an enemy flash, you click flash on your tracker and you now have a more or less accurate cooldown of that spell. This is all just a portion of the power Prohibited can give you. So if you're ready to start improving in your future games, click the first link in description and download Prohibited for free today. Riot Games is a multi-billion-dollar company. But despite that, just like you and I, they also make mistakes. Like a while back, it would seem that developers overlooked an interaction between Ryze and the water walking rune that allowed Ryze to farm an almost unlimited amount of mana just by briefly walking into the river. This is not an intended interaction. So in professional leagues, Riot disabled the combination from being used by players. But on January 22nd, 2023, a player picked both Ryze and the water walking rune regardless of it being disabled. Now, despite taking the rune, the player didn't take advantage of the bug associated with the rune. However, regardless of them abusing the exploit or not, his team received an undisclosed monetary fine as they technically broke the rules. Likely just a form of setting examples and not creating complicated exceptions. Are you really gonna fine someone for a bug that Riot hasn't fixed after 10 plus months of it being in the game? Yes they are. Sometimes things don't always make sense. But perhaps not surprisingly, this wasn't the only time that something like this occurred. Just recently we had an example of this in Korea, which was a little more drama-filled than the previous instance. On June 9th, 2023, the player Aiming, playing ADC, purchased Static Shiv as their first item. However, due to an ongoing bug with the item, teams had already been told that they were not allowed to buy Static Shiv on the current patch. Well, 13 minutes into the game, the ADC of KT Roaster buys the item, and then the game would go on to be paused by the officials.
But yes, the pause has actually nothing to do with the top lane interaction that we just saw. That was just Keen dying. Nothing to worry about. It was in fact Aiming buying an item that you're not supposed to.
However, this ended up being a bigger problem than you'd think. The game went on to be paused for over 40 minutes while referees and staff figured out what would happen next.
Aiming, by the way, is going to sell the item, and we are going to have the game resume.
Oh, okay. That's pretty simple. Let's move on. Nope, instead, the massive delay came from KT Roaster's coach arguing with the referees on whether or not the team should be punished for buying the item. Specifically, he did not agree with the player having to sell the item, as the player would not get back the full value he spent. He would instead be set back 900 gold for their mistake. But arguing aside, that was the final decision and rules are rules. He sold the item and the game proceeded. They did end up losing though. However, for delaying the game and allegedly using quote inappropriate language toward the referee, KT Roaster's coach was given a 2-week suspension and fined $1,500. Staying on the topic of players making costly mistakes, I mentioned in the intro a player being fined for forgetting to take smite, which is a story we spoke about in a previous video. The player Wei in the LPL forgot to take smite, they lost the game, and he was later fined an entire month's salary by his team for letting a mistake like that happen. Arguably a crazy punishment. But while making that previous video, I was surprised to see that I overlooked it, but 1 year later, the exact same thing happened again. On July 27th, 2021, the player PZX of Victory 5 Esports went into a match with teleport instead of smite. It goes without saying, this was a major setback and they lost.
I'm really confused.
Go on.
Why does PZX have TP and no smite?
Oh no!
This has to be a mistake, right? I mean, I haven't seen this if this isn't a mistake. I'm assuming this is a mistake. I don't know why you'd ever do this to yourself.
It was definitely a mistake, and once again, a costly one. His team fined him 1 month of his salary for making this mistake. Once again, quite the extreme punishment. And I sometimes wonder, what is the all-time biggest esports fine? But realistically, it probably does come down to one of these entire month salary fines done by teams in China. Because 1, LPL players make a ridiculous amount of money, and 2, the idea of being unpaid for a month of work isn't really a punishment that would hold up in many other countries where Riot operates. But with that being said, we go from one extreme to another. 2-game suspension for allegedly calling someone an ape. This happened in June of 2022 to the LEC player Crowny for, quote, exhibiting negative attitude and inappropriate language toward other players in solo queue. Now initially we didn't know what really happened, but later the streamer LS revealed that allegedly his offense was simply, quote, Crowny called someone an ape. The player later followed up in the streamer's chat and said his message was directed to a random Platinum 3 player. Additionally, he said that pros have said things 300 times worse. IMO. Which is actually true. In 2016, a player was fined $2,000 and was suspended in the middle of the world's group stage for being toxic in chat. Specifically, he was exposed for telling another pro player to, quote, go die. But he only said it one time. Okay, he may have said it a couple of times. This story is especially worth mentioning because of how the player defended himself. After these messages were exposed, he made a Facebook post stating his ability to communicate in English wasn't good. So he said, quote, the words go die that I said to the pro was not telling him to go die, but it was because he had so many deaths and every time he went to mid, he would get ganked and die. That does make sense. Not really. He probably would have got away with that, but the attention caused Riot to check his account and he had multiple instances of verbally attacking teammates and usage of racially insensitive language. For this, he received his monetary fine and was suspended for 1 match, which I think is fair enough. But you tell me what you think. Maybe you think toxic players should lose a month of their salaries as well. We'll make a poll. Regardless, that's all for today. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care.